Let's freaking go! Zalance Heard commits to LSU. Comment down below. Do you believe this is the best offensive pickup for 2023, okay? And look, there is so much that I'm going to get to in today's video. A little bit later, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the offensive line class as a whole. And then at the end, what's next for LSU recruiting. But right off the jump here, Zalance Heard, he's worth the hype, right? A top 100 offensive lineman out of Neville, right? And this is a guy that is unbelievably athletic. He really pops off the page as far as this build. I don't really even think he looks like an offensive tackle. He kind of feels like an NBA player. His legs are long. He's very mean and ferocious. And one thing I love about him is that I think he could still bulk up and potentially become an even bigger athletic freak than he already is, right? And the one thing I like about him is that he does play really hard. His goal on every snap is to bury you. But now, in the early portions of this video, I want to play a little game with you. Can you spot Zalance Heard and the other Division I offensive lineman here? I wonder if there is a magical way you could determine which one of these guys here are Division I prospects. And if you guessed 66 and 53, you are correct. So first thing here is, this is, of course, Will Campbell, who will be your starting left tackle versus Florida State on Sunday night. And this is Lance Heard. So I do believe we have a Kayshon Boutte situation, where Zalance Heard, his name on all the services is Zalance, but on his Huddle and his Twitter account, he only goes by Lance. So I'm going to call him Lance for the rest of the video. Don't get confused by that. But I also wanted to point out the name, the offensive lineman thing, because you could probably do the same thing on the defensive side of the football, because I do feel the biggest jump from high school to Division I college football, it's just the size of the lineman. It's just so radically different. And that is obviously the biggest jump for most Division I offensive linemen, is that you're going up against athletes everywhere that are athletic, are as athletic as you are. So that is very important to keep in mind when watching Lance Heard. While he is burying a lot of guys, this defensive lineman tripped and he still punished him. While he is burying and taking guys to the ground, keep in mind that, that's going to be hard to do consistently at the Division I level. But on the other side of it, and look, I know this isn't the case on every single play. These are just his highlights. But the fact that he does this so often lets you know he goes out there and dominates his opposition, which is always a good thing. So, for me, I'm really, really feeling this commitment. I really do think this is big for LSU. Now, we talked about Lance Heard up to this point and his athleticism. I do feel there are some pad level concerns as far as like firing off a little high, but that's always the case for a lot of Power 5 players, and I think that will be able to work out. Is he a year one type of talent? Potentially, yes. But still, there are some things that will get cleaned up when he gets to the next level. Now, as far as the offensive line class overall, it's really good, right? You add in Tyree Adams, who I think isn't too far off from Lance in terms of just pure talent. And then you also have Paul Mabenga, a really good 3-star offensive lineman out of Buford, Georgia, as a part of this class. So a really nice offensive line class that I think is only going to get better for LSU. Yes, they are not done yet. And while Lance Heard did commit to LSU, we did feel pretty good about this for a while now, especially, once Will Campbell committed it, you felt really good about Lance following suit. Being a Louisianimal, that's always a fun thing. And, there's going to be playing time up for grabs next year on this offensive line. That really will be. So there's a lot to like if you're Lance Heard going to LSU. But I do think if LSU is able to land DJ Chester, a really good offensive lineman out of Georgia, that will be just as impactful just simply because he is an out-of-state offensive lineman. And that is something that LSU is trying to do. They want to develop a program reputation for getting top offensive line talent, even when it's not in the state of Louisiana. And the reason why that is very important is historically, Louisiana has not been an offensive line producer. And really, when you look at the brands per se and the positions that are just unreal at certain schools, when you think offensive line, you don't think LSU. Whereas a defensive back, wide receiver, linebacker, pretty much any position, you're going to talk about LSU. Now, it's not to say there haven't been good offensive linemen. There have been. It's just not as big of a brand per se, right? LSU's last offensive lineman selected in the first round of the NFL draft was all the way back in 1998, and that player ended up getting into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Alan Faneca. So think about all the first-round picks LSU's had. Rarely do they have first-round picks, and rarely do they have second-round picks. There's only been a few during that time period as well. Ed Ingram, Ethan Posick, and Andrew Whitworth. So it is very interesting, and I do think Brian Kelly is turning the page on that. Look, it has helped out that in BK's first couple of classes here, Louisiana has produced 4 four-star offensive linemen, and I still think Emory Jones is going to be really good, along with Will Campbell and, of course, Tyree Adams in this crop. But I do think BK knows that nationally he wants to make LSU an offensive line brand. So it leads us to this portion of the video. Boom! I'm looking at you. Yes, you. Right now, okay? So you guys know about the Patreon, and that obviously helps grow our channel. But we also released a free Power Hour LSU podcast wherever you get your podcast, or if you're iTunes or Spotify or anything like that. And I just recently released an episode that shows the difference in draft picks from Notre Dame in the last decade compared to LSU's draft picks on the offensive line. And what's funny is LSU's actually had more offensive linemen selected in the NFL draft than Brian Kelly had at Notre Dame. But there is a major asterisk to that. Go check it out. Power Hour LSU. That was episode 3. We just dropped another episode on who I think truly won the quarterback battle. So subscribe, ring the bell. It sounds different. It looks different. And the reason why I launched that project is, well, a lot of you kept saying, why aren't you on Apple? Why aren't you doing a podcast, Spotify, and all that stuff? Well, there you go. Now you get it. And don't forget about our Gold Rookie Tyrann Mathieu autograph fantasy football giveaway. All you got to do is sign up for the Patreon. You're helping me grow, get to be a part of a fun fantasy football league, and you get a chance to win one of my favorite cards in my collection. So really quickly here, I want to jump through a few other news and notes as far as Brian Kelly is concerned and this offensive line crop. So we talked about DJ Chester. We talked about this recruiting class as a whole. And obviously Brian Kelly is trying to turn this into an offensive line program. Now, why is that important? Well, I know at LSU we have this fascination with beating Alabama, right? And you've heard me talk a lot about how much better the rest of the SEC West has gotten, and you give those, teams a lot of credit. But the truth is, if you want to win the West, you got to beat Alabama, right? And to me, the way you beat Alabama is with better offensive line play. If you look at LSU and Alabama during the Saban regime, right, the only real gap I felt when you compare the greatness at the position groups, the only one I can really say that's been significantly better at Alabama than LSU is the offensive line. That really is it. And once again, I reiterate the same point I made earlier. LSU has had plenty great offensive lines. I have always said the 2007 offensive line is probably the most underrated position group of the modern era. That was a really, really, really good group. But you know, if you're an LSU fan, the offensive line issues the Tigers have had. And sometimes it's not for a lack of talent. A lot of these guys on a struggling offensive line over the past couple of years still got drafted. So, there's so much that goes into it. So much of it is your quarterback and your play caller and all of that. But it's got to get better. And this is a good step in the right direction. And every year, especially during these last 5 to 7-ish Saban years, his offensive lines are really good, right? Barrett Jones to now with Evan Neal from last year. And it's still up in the air if they're Alabama's offensive line struggled last year as well. They just had a superstar quarterback. But point being is this is really, really good. And I'm very happy, especially if Chester commits, that our offensive line recruiting is getting better. And to give you one little extra stat, as many of you know, I give you extra deep dive nuggets at the end of our videos. There has been a study done from J. Bud Davis that shows that offensive line transfer portal players just aren't the same in terms of volume and numbers of offensive linemen as other positions. I didn't say that smoothly at all. I'll say it again. Offensive linemen transfer the least, right? I don't know exactly why that's the case, but it's true. Skill position guys transfer more often than linemen do. And I think that's the case on both sides of the ball, but it's definitely the case on the offensive side. So, you got to get a lot of these guys out of high school, right? I think I did a radio spot in Monroe recently where I said, God, I hope Zalance Heard commits. Maybe he heard me. Get it? No, I'm just kidding. That was a bad joke. But yeah, you should feel really, really good. I had another stat for this video, but it's a little too early for all that. Let me know what you guys think, and this train will keep moving. Getting ready for the Florida State game, getting all those film studies out. There will be some floating in your face here in just a second. It is Power Hour LSU Bomb. And tonight, some pizza. Let's go.